you guys have to navigate something very complicated and unique, which is show them your expertise, take in their feedback, collect their feedback, plus the entire world of feedback that you've collected from other customers, narrow and boil that down to the fundamentals of what's important and what you think to them, and then show them something that they haven't seen before. Because again, they don't know it until they've seen it because you're showing them.
Hey, y'all, you're listening to the McClain Method Podcast, episode number 77. Welcome to the McClain Method, the podcast for interior designers who are ready to stop hiding and start shining. I'm your host, John McClain, designer, business mentor, author, and your branding bestie. This is not about paint colors or pendant lighting. It's about building a business that's both visible and profitable, inside and out. From marketing and messaging to mindset, systems, and visibility, we cover the front stage and the backstage of your design business. Because your brilliance deserves the spotlight, and your business deserves to run like a dream behind the scenes. So if you're ready to be seen, get recognized, and get booked, it's time to let it shine. Welcome to the McClain Method. Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode of the McClain Method Podcast. Very good to see you here again in your ears. I love being there. Today we're going to have a different kind of a conversation. I'm talking to a product developer, and he's not only just a product developer, he's also an entrepreneur. And we are going to dive into, of course, his product and what it is and how that works. But really the conversation revolves around sales. And if the word sales makes you squirm in your seat, this episode can be your antidote. Today I'm joined by Christopher Francis, who is the mind behind Home Plunge, which is the first ever cold plunge designed specifically for your home bathtub. So a very cool product. His background spans engineering, sales, and product development. Christopher is going to share how he took a personal pain point, which is his post-soccer knee pain, and transformed it into a high-demand wellness product. In this episode, we're going to dive into how to sell with integrity and zero sleaze, because it's not sleazy, why your clients don't actually know what they want until you show them, the power of listening like a pro and reading those non-verbal cues as well, building a brand that solves real problems and looks beautiful doing it, and the mindset shift that changed Christopher's business and could change yours too. This conversation will shift how you sell, how you connect with your clients, and how you see your own value. Now let's jump into the episode with Christopher Francis. Hey Christopher, welcome to the McClain Method Podcast.
Hey John, great to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. I love the topic today, and I think it's something that we've either wanted to discuss before and never had someone with your expertise, or we just didn't know where to begin with it. So I think this is a very interesting topic, and your background is interesting too. And it's a very layered background, shall we say, right? With engineering and lighting and now wellness. But I want to talk about the background that you have, of course. But before we get into all that, just tell everyone in your own words about who you are and how you got into the business that you're in now.
Yeah, so I'm Christopher. I'm the founder of Home Plunge, which is the very first cold plunge ever made for the home bathtub. I took a different approach to cold plunging and wellness by creating this product. I never thought I would be in this situation. It's been a jumping around from starting my career in engineering to sales and then finally product development. And I'm excited to talk about it.
When we're talking about your background and all the things that you did, which is really taking like complex ideas that seem complicated to people and then turning them into something that people connect with. So what do you think is your superpower in taking those complex ideas and really turning them into things that people are like, yeah, I like that?
I love this question so much because when I was switching from engineering to sales, I would read books and I would study Steve Jobs videos. Like when he would go and announce the iPod or the iPhone or whatever it was, he was always on stage. And when he did these announcemements, you'll pick up that he always had this really great way to translate something complex like technology, whether it be the feature set or how well the computer performed, the new Mac, and he would translate it into something that we could all understand and relate to. It's like perfect example. When he launched the new iPod mini, the way that he described the new size of it and how it's so small is he showed a stack of 6 quarters on the screen. And he said, it's smaller than a stack of quarters in your pocket. And I was just like, this guy, he's a total marketing genius. And so by watching those videos and studying what he did, I tried to take just the fundamental way that he did that and apply that when I worked for Ketra in New York. which was the reinvention of the LED light bulb. I came in not knowing anyone in the lighting industry. I had to learn all of the control schemes, the way everything worked, the vocabulary that goes on with lighting and designers, and find a way for not only to get them to respect me and listen to what I was saying, but help them understand that this new super advanced LED light bulb, a way that they could understand it and that's not complicated and something that they could relate to and they already were familiar with. And so through that practice in New York with Ketra, and then as an engineer, I think developing that superpower of being able to communicate complex features or ideas into the layperson or anyone for that matter, no matter what your background is super powerful.
You mentioned Steve Jobs. Didn't he say something like, you'll have 1,000 songs in your pocket or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, and I think that exactly what you said is, it sounds so simple, but simple doesn't mean dumbing it down and making the other person feel stupid, right? It just means simplifying it in a way that they can relate to, or saying things in a way that they can relate to. And you're exactly right. As designers and people who are owning their business or hoping to own a business in interior design, I think a lot of us are concerned about how to relay a message even to a client, right? And if we fully understand what we're doing and what pain point we're going to address for them, then it's pretty easy to say what your product does or what your service does to solve their problem. But how do you know what that problem is, right? So we may look around the world and we think, oh, well, people want wellness, or people want this, or people want a beautiful home, or people want to redesign their kitchen in our situations. But what steps do you have, or what tips do you have for all of us to understand better our clients' pain points and the things that really matter to them?
Yeah, I'll go back to mentioning that book I read when I was getting into sales, The Psychology of Sales. Such a great book. Even if you're not in sales or not going to sales, I think everyone should read this, because one of the lessons there was that you want to talk as little as possible, especially in the situation that you just described. Say you're a designer and you're meeting with your customer or potential customer. You want them to tell you as much as you can. You want to do as much active listening as possible to really understand them and their need and their problem. Because it's really only when you do understand those details that you can actually provide for them the best possible solution. If you don't understand those and understand them fully, you might be able to get them close, but you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing them a disservice by just not fully getting it. I know that sounds very obvious, but it really makes a difference. If you can talk 10% of the time and let them talk 90% of the time, I think it will just help really anyone in any profession.
Yeah, my grandfather always reminded me, you have 2 ears for a reason and only one mouth, right? And it's true. It is so true. And I think that not only do you pick up on things, in my experience, from actual verbal cues, but also just like what they're doing physically, like what is their body language? Are they cowering when they say something? Are they flailing their arms with excitement when they talk about one particular topic? Watching people and how they react to what you say, I think is also part of the equation. Do you agree with that?
Totally. I mean, everyone knows that arms crossed, when you see someone, that means they're defensive. So they might have sales defense or whatever it is. They might not be totally buying what you're approaching them with. Or you might suggest one solution or one idea, and you'll see something in their face or some turn of their body that just sort of shows they're not totally sold on what you're suggesting. And so it's important to pick up on that. It's not to pull away from the confidence of what you're doing, but there's a certain softness to being able to react to that and really jive with someone and read their body language and say, or we could try this, or does this sound better,
Yeah, and what you said though, being in the moment and actively listening to what they're saying and actively watching as well what they're saying and with their body language is really important, because a lot of times when we go into a sales situation, and for you, it of course is speaking about your product and talking about the benefits of that and talking to designers and homeowners and so forth. And then for us, it's mostly, if we're dealing with residential design, it's talking to homeowners again who are having a problem. And I think if we go in with like this script in our head of what we need to say and what we're going to say without listening, with, like the horse with blinders on, then we're never going to move forward in the process for that. Because pivoting, I think, is half the battle, right? When you're having a two-way conversation with people.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try my best not to quote Steve Jobs like over and over again.
I love it. No, I love Steve Jobs.
But and actually don't even know if he really ever said this, because I got this one from the movie where there's two really good movies about him, but the one where Ashton Kutcher portrayed him.
Oh, yeah.
And they're in the garage. He's with Steve Wozniak, and he said they're arguing over whether the Mac should have 2 ports or 6 ports for customizations. And Steve wanted just 2, simple as possible. And he said people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And I just thought that was such a powerful line, because for you and every designer that's listening, you're dealing with customers, you're working with customers that they want you to design something for them. But because they're spending the extra money and they're paying for you, they probably have their own opinions as well. And that's got to be an ongoing conflict with designers and homeowners, and they're just like, oh, I want to do it this way. And I trust your judgment, but I really like this. And you guys have to navigate something very complicated and unique, which is show them your expertise, take in their feedback, collect their feedback, plus the entire world of feedback that you've collected from other customers, narrow and boil that down to the fundamentals of what's important and what you think to them, and then show them something that they haven't seen before. Because again, they don't know it until they've seen it because you're showing them.
That's a very good point. And not only are we listening to what we've spoken to other clients about, but sometimes there's kids and housekeepers, and everybody has an opinion when it comes to, you'd be amazed when you go in to redesign a home, how many people suddenly speak up about what they've been wanting for 10 years that no one's ever given them. It's so funny how that happens.
I got married last June, and I had a lot of opinions about where the venue would be and certain details about the band and all this. But you know what? At the end of the day, when we would get on the call with our wedding planner and my mother-in-law, halfway through all the planning calls, I just stopped attending because I realized, hey, this is not my show. My opinions do not matter here. So I don't know if I was the kid or the housekeeper in that situation, but I had to just get out.
I love that. Well, at least you learned and you decided to implement what you learned. That's a big lesson there too. I think that's funny. But also to your point about people don't know until you tell them. I've had those situations where on a call with a client or on a call with a potential client, I initially would hesitate on saying something that I knew innately was what they needed for their home, or I would hesitate on saying something that I knew would help them because it was too out there, quote unquote, or something that no one has ever done before. And then when I started saying that thing that popped into my head, when I started actually sharing that thought, it was surprising to me how many people were lit up by that. There's a fear we have of exposing ourselves when it comes to what's, between our ears, that intellectual property that we all have, you as a business owner and as a creator of a product and us as creators of home design. I think there's a little bit of hesitation on our part of exposing all of the things that we want to share with clients and with potential clients. Did you experience any of that when you were developing your product or when you were trying to showcase your product to people? Or is there anything that you're like, oh man, that's so good, but I don't know how people are going to react to that because it's never been done before?
Yeah, absolutely. My mind went straight to just the quality control of my first batch of production. And we didn't set up between my factory and I the right procedures to test for certain things that personally I thought would be just blaringly obvious of what you need to do. But there is a certain level of, like, especially with an offshore factory, where they don't do cold plunging in that country. And they're not familiar with what the total user experience is really like. So a lot more education and handholding had to come from myself to them to understand just what this user experience really is and what I expect, especially my product sells for $3,000. I need this product to show up in perfect condition. The customer expects that. They deserve that. That was a huge learning lesson there. In order to counteract that, and I thought the best thing to do would just be transparent with my audience, whether it be an existing customer or a future potential customer, and lay out publicly, here's are some of the issues that we had with the first production. Here's how we've improved them. And I treated it, coming from a tech background as well, I treated it as sort of like, in software, they call it a change log, where when you push out a software update, you see all the things, all the bugs that were fixed, all the improvements that are made. And I don't see why we shouldn't treat hardware that way. And so I talk about the first version to the next version, and I'll continue to do that and expose the roadmap publicly because I think that's just the authentic thing to do.
I agree. And honestly, as a designer, but more as a consumer, when a product developer or a new product or someone who, like yourself, is the founder, when you're sharing those stories, it pulls me in and it really makes me actually feel more connected to someone who understands that this didn't work, but I care enough about it to make that change and to figure out how to make it better. As a consumer and as someone who is going to use the end product that's being designed, it's always nice to know that there's someone caring on the other side of that name or that brand or that website, wherever you're getting it from. And it's great to say, yeah, look, they understood this wasn't the best way to do this and they changed. That's a huge lesson learned for everyone because we all want to put the magic out there. We all want to show the final perfect end result of whatever that is, whether it's a product or whether it's a home design or any of those things. And it's hard to share the messy middle, right? Because that's not the part that is sexy as that final thing. But to your point, I've learned to share the ups and the downs. I mean, there's some things, of course, you don't want to air all your dirty laundry out to the world. But I think if you can share some of those things, it just humanizes the experience. And I think that's so great. I want to go in more of sales now. And again, we mentioned that you pivoted from engineering into sales. I don't know how many designers you've spoken to or have ever worked with them as far as watch us try to sell something to someone, because a lot of designers are terrified of the word sales. It is so scary and they don't even know what to do, where to start, how to close it out. And for myself, I had a background in advertising sales before I was an interior designer. So it helped me to know and to pick up on signals from clients and all of those things that we learn when we are selling to people, when we're actively listening, as you said. But what do you wish interior designers understood about selling? And you mentioned a couple of those things so far, but is there something that you think, based upon your experience and things that you've done other than what you've mentioned already, and there may not be anything else, I don't know, but is there something that you wish that we maybe understood more about selling and that we could do to close some deals with our own client?
Well, first, I'll say that if someone out there is scared of it, like you said, there's a fear to sales. I think that's 100% accurate, especially when you first start doing it. When I first transitioned from engineering to sales, I was terrified, and I would go up because back then there was none of this video like we're doing right now, the video sales. I moved to New York City. I learned this new lighting product, and I would have to go into basically 3 or 4 architecture or lighting design or interior design offices a day and put the lights on the table, hope that they had shades that I could manipulate, bring them up or lower them down to control the lighting in the room, plug my lights in, set up a control system, and pray to God that the Wi-Fi would work and my app would work to do the dog and pony show I need to do. But in that time, when I was first starting to do it, I'm very soft spoken. And so my manager would be in the back of the room and he'd be like, talk louder, talk louder. And I would see him doing it, but I would just stay quiet and I wouldn't adjust to it. Eventually, I overcame those things, but it goes to show that everyone does it a little differently and everyone's personality is different in that way. And so you might be a complete natural from the start and talking to people that way and trying to sell your services, or it may take you a while, but practice, just like with anything, you get better with practice. Once you overcome that, I would say my greatest piece of advice, if you're trying to be better at sales or you're trying to learn it, is treat it like education. That always worked the best for me. I'm educating you on what I have here. And I'm not thinking so much about, and I know this is probably really hard to do, but especially if it's your livelihood, but I'm trying not to think about what the monetary outcome is. If you're in that meeting with someone or virtually, wherever it is, and all that's on your mind is, oh, I'm going to get X amount of dollars from this transaction, there's no possible way you're going to have as good of a connection with that customer, that prospect, than the authentic just education of, hey, here's who I am, here's what I do, here's the benefits that are going to help you. But even before you go through all 3 of those things, like we said at the beginning, it's understanding exactly what their problems are and their needs are. And if you understand those, then those next things that follow just come so much better.
Yes, that is so great. I've always said sales is service. It's not sleazy when you're helping someone solve a problem and understanding the value that you bring, right? That is not a nasty term to sell something to someone that you know is going to make their life better and will improve the way that they live. And a lot of us go in there with like, oh God, I got to get this deal closed because I got to pay the mortgage this month or pay the rent on the building and whatever. You go in with that mindset, people will pick you up on that in a second. That energy is so negative and so wrong for a sales situation, in my opinion, when you go in with that mentality. I love how you said that you're soft spoken, you go in with your techniques. You can adapt techniques, of course, but when you go in and you're selling to someone as your true self, whether you're an introvert, whether you're an extrovert, whether you're in the middle, you'll find someone who will relate to that, draw that person into you, and they'll actually want to buy something from you. Because when you don't share your personality, when you don't share who you are, when you aren't your authentic self and you pretend to be someone else, you think that someone else wants, that is just putting a false narrative out to everybody. And I think that's never going to land anywhere as a success with a sales call.
Yeah, and a good product or service sells itself. So
Mm.
you have to have confidence in yourself as a designer that your service is good. And if you don't believe that, if that's within your own mental thing that you're working through, then you're not going to be as successful as when you do build up that confidence and you can sell your services because you believe that they're the best there is. You believe that what you do is amazing and great. And once you have that part down, like the rest, I'm not going to say it comes easy, but that's the building block to the rest being successful.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Y'all need to rewind that part and listen to that again. That is so true, Christopher. Thank you for saying that. I totally believe that. It all starts in the quiet of your office or your home office or wherever you are working on whatever you're working on. That is where the sales cycle starts right there when you truly believe in what you're going to sell to that person and present to that person. And again, how it's going to solve a problem. I love that so much. So I want to talk about Home Plunge for a minute and that whole evolution of your company and your brand. What do you think designers can learn about how you built your brand? And not just as a product, but as a solution, as we just discussed, right? Like, how can we pick up on cues from you of the whole development process and what you have done to build your brand as a solution to a client's problem?
Yeah, so I'll speak about this from maybe more of the entrepreneurial perspective and how I sort of concepted it and why I did it to begin with. I don't know, I can't say this for sure, but I don't know that many of the other companies out there doing cold therapy got into it out of solving a problem for themselves as opposed to maybe a business opportunity. What I did was, as a 30-year plus soccer player that has really just terrible knees, I'm 38 years old now. I just played soccer last night. Fortunately, I was able to cold plunge this morning and I feel good. But before I had it, I would have to limp up and down my stairs. It was rough. It really is a sort of overnight magic trick to be able to do this. And I never knew that because as growing up in school and being an athlete, I would always just fill the Ziploc bag with ice from my freezer, then put it on what hurts, right? That is a good thing to do. But one day, it was 2.5 years ago, I just kept hearing podcasters talk about cold plunging and people you wouldn't even expect, like business podcasts. They were talking about cold plunging and how it just helps them so much. So I was like, all right, I gotta see what this is like. I gotta try it. So I took the ice tray from my freezer and I dumped it into my bathtub and I filled up the tub and I got in. Now that probably wasn't incredibly cold, just the limited amount of ice that comes out of there, but it was night and day different from just putting a bag of ice on my knee. And so in that moment, I realized, okay, this is something I need in my life. I can truly directly experience the benefits. So I'm going to buy a cold plunge. So I Googled it. I started seeing all the products on there. I went to the leading company's website and I was like, all right, this looks pretty good. I've already bought a piece of exercise equipment before that my wife made me remove from the house because it was so ugly. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. I have to find one that looks good. It's very expensive. It's $7,000 to $8,000. Gosh, I really don't want to spend that much. But if it allows me to not nearly fall down the stairs the next day after soccer because I have to hold on to the rail, then that's probably worth it. And so I had mentally committed to buying this very expensive product. And then just as before I did it, I looked around the house and we live in San Francisco and I realized, oh, wait, there's literally nowhere to put this thing. We do not have the space for this. It's huge. Once it's filled up with water, it's going to weigh 1,000 pounds. I can't do it. So what am I going to do? Okay, let's pivot. So Google cold plunge for the bathtub. And I was just utterly shocked. It didn't exist. No one had made any product like this. It was always the inflatable tank or the acrylic bathtub lookalike. You either have to put the ice and water in yourself, or it came with this sort of plumbed in chiller. And I thought, as someone that started my career as an engineer, that transitioned to sales and marketing, and then sort of the tail end there, while I was searching that, I was in product development. It was just the perfect storm for me that I had always wanted to start my own business. I just never really knew what. I then was inspired because I saw the problem in the market, price and space, and I saw the need for myself and how I experienced how much the benefits from doing this actually helped. And it wasn't like, okay, right there, I'm going to go all in on this. No, it was, I want to see, I'm going to think about this every single day. I'm going to talk to people. Is there a market for this bathtub cold plunge? And so I talked to friends and family and said, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. And I started getting feedback, started sketching. I started showing people like, hey, would this look good? What's the form and function of it to be acceptable to put in your actual bathroom? Because that's a sacred place. You can't just put, noisy refrigerator fan in your bathroom and just assume that's going to be acceptable. So about 6 months later, then I think that the next thing I did, and I wish I would have done this even sooner, and this is my recommendation to the audience, is make as little of an investment you can. If you're thinking about starting a business or doing something on your own, don't just assume it's going to work and then go all in overnight. But on the side, you can make a small investment just to get started. Because once you make that small investment, now you've got money on the table. Now you're going to be more incentivized to actually take action little by little versus the person that always says, everyone knows this person. And a lot of the people listening, it's probably you, no offense, but it's probably like, oh yeah, I had that idea and then I saw someone else do it because I never did it. You might be thinking of a problem right now that you could solve, but you're afraid to start it. And you need to put just a little bit, whatever it is. So for me, it was going on Amazon and buying an aquarium chiller, putting it next to my bathtub and seeing what it looked like and how I could make it better. But having that physically there and having invested that little amount of money to begin with was the push I needed to start then designing and iterating and then getting more and more continuous design, continuous improvement, and to the point of which I was like, all right, a year later, I'm all in. I quit my job. I'm prototyping. I'm going towards production manufacturing. And then here we are.
There's so many nuggets in there of your journey. I think a lot of it comes from you, again, having that problem and understanding or wanting to understand how to fix that problem on your own, and then realizing that maybe other people also have the same problem too. And when you were in the early stages of like basically coming up with the concept of this product, and I want to talk about literally specifically what it is, because it's a really cool product and the way that it is so portable and anyone can bring it into their home who wants to cold plunge. But when you were in the early stages of developing your product and kind of thinking like, okay, I want it to be this, how much of your story did you know that you wanted to include in that? Because I always feel storytelling is just so critical to selling something and to relaying the message behind it. Did you share the history of your product now and the story behind it? And if so, how has that changed things for you?
I don't push it. I don't overly push it because I really don't want the brand to be about me. But I do think there is an element of importance to just the purpose behind the product. And I think that consumers can relate to and trust a product more when they know that it's purpose driven versus just a business opportunity. And so that's why on the website I have my story, and it's a very brief cutout, but it's basically what I described as a soccer player. I had this issue with my knees, and it really just allowed me to keep doing the thing I love by cold plunging. Again, I don't push it, but I find that to be important, the brand.
Yeah, I think someone's listening and they're like, yeah, you know what? I have the same problem after I play tennis or whatever, right? And they can understand how they can get the same benefit from that. And if you're a designer listening and maybe you have a pain point in your own home that you solved by enlarging your kitchen, like for instance, every house in our neighborhood is the same house, literally on the outside, and then mostly on the inside too. But of course, as a designer, I renovated and gutted the entire thing when I bought the house before we even, were in it less than a year, brand new house. But what I did was I increased the size of our kitchen by just 15 inches, right? Just 15 inches. Again, every house is the same, but I increased ours by 15 inches. That 15-inch difference makes all the difference in the world when it comes to adding more people into my kitchen and entertaining. And I have neighbors come over and they're like, your kitchen feels so big. And I'm like, yes, it's actually only 15 inches larger than yours. But by sharing that story with clients, sometimes letting them know like how the smallest physical change can make the biggest emotional change to them is, again, sometimes the thing that clinches the deal and allows me to totally renovate their kitchen or allows me to gut their bathroom and start from scratch and put in radiant heat flooring or whatever that issue is that they're having. So I love that you shared that part of it. Tell people about your product physically, because I think that the design of it is really cool and the benefits of being able to make it portable and store it in a closet when you're not using it and all those other things. But tell people about the physical aspects of your product and what it does once you have that in your bathroom.
Yeah, so I'll start with what the traditional form factor looks like, which is a very large water reservoir. Think about an outdoor bathtub, and permanently plumbed into it is a water chiller. Once you fill that situation up with water, it's going to weigh 1,000 pounds. You can't move it, and it's exposed to the elements. What I wanted to do differently is have something that would be inside in the bathroom. It had to be just a white product. It's less than a 2-foot cube. It looks like a square. It goes right next to your bathtub. And it's on wheels so it can roll in and out. And it's nice and white. What makes it unique from the other cold plunge chillers is that on the top, there's a quick connecting, what I call a hose arm. It has 2 water tubes that are actually hidden inside. You don't see the 2 tubes. So most people ask how it works. They don't realize there's an inlet and an outlet water tube inside.
Oh,
and this
yeah, I didn't know that.
See, there you go. So it's a bend and stay mechanism. Once you click it into the top, there's no screwing or fasteners or anything. It literally clicks right into the top, and then you bend it over. The reason I did a bend and stay mechanism is because everyone's tub's different. You don't know what the height's going to be. And so it needed to bend over the edge of the tub and get into the water, and it stays. And so it stays in whatever orientation you put it in. You fill up your tub. It draws the water out of your bathtub. It goes into the chiller. It goes down to 37 Fahrenheit if you want to go that cold, but you don't have to. And then it puts it back into the tub. And within, usually for most people, 30 minutes to an hour, you've now converted your home bathtub into a full cold therapy ice cold plunge. And it's fantastic.
That's so awesome. I mean, it looks easy and simplistic on the outside. I know all the engineering and research that you put into the interior part of it. I just learned something new when you were describing that, and I looked at the website before I came on. But that's really interesting that you have made something that was not in the market, that, as you said before, with the whole Apple thing, that they didn't even know that they needed until now. And I want to go into that a little bit on the wellness category. And I know it's trending with interior designers lately and just the world in general, but you know it's deeper than just what's trending. How should designers really be thinking about the category of wellness and the new term that you described earlier before we hit record that is actually the new term for wellness. Let's talk about how we should be thinking about wellness when it comes to taking your product and maybe recommending your product to our clients. What do we need to know about wellness in general before we do that?
I'm going to think back to when I worked for Ketra in New York, and we had this really, with those lights. So if you're not familiar with Ketra, which was later acquired by Lutron, it's a luxury lighting system, mostly probably now residential. At the time it was commercial, that had this feature that we called natural light. And circadian rhythm lighting has become almost common now. It's in almost all the products. But Ketra was really the pioneer in that space. You'd set it up, and through its own native protocol, you could put on what's called a natural show. And when you turn the lights on in the morning, they would be a soft, like if the sun hadn't risen yet, it'd be this very soft, warm, dim glow. And as the sun rose, it would actually sync to your geographical location. I'm still selling this product because I just love these lights so much. And it would get cooler and brighter throughout the day. And then in the evening, it would warm and dim all on its own. And it was just magical, right? But we got in trouble as I would demo this, and we learned through the lighting community, who are experts. They've gone through a lot of school in designing interiors and specifying lights, when we would say things like natural light, or we would talk about the science behind circadian rhythms and trying to educate them as experts when really we're the manufacturer. We weren't some scientists. We were getting the data from scientists. But the reason I bring this up is because if we're talking about biohacking products and all that stuff, you want to be very careful, because the consumer or your customer who's having their home design, they're not dumb. I know you probably have a lot of challenging customers as well, but they're also probably not dumb, and they can smell the BS. And if you come at them with wellness features just because it's trending, and it's good to follow the trends for your business, but if you want to maintain integrity and the trust of your customer, I think it's important to have, whether it be, I wouldn't say expert knowledge, but just know the subject of whatever the modality of wellness you're talking about. So for me, cold plunging, I'm not an expert in the science of cold therapy, but I know personally what it does for me. And so what I tend to lead with, instead of talking about 10, 20 things of the benefits of cold plunging, I talk about my own personal experience. I talk about how I can walk again the next day after soccer, and how it reduces my inflammation, and it really makes me feel like a new person. But because I'm not a scientist in the space, I'm not going to say, hey, trust me, I know that it does X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. That is what I would recommend to any designer trying to implement wellness into your designs. Whether you're trying to specify a cold plunge, a sauna, a red light therapy bed, anything of all the millions of wellness products that exist now today. If at all possible, you're probably most successful if you've had personal experience with that modality. That way you have an anecdote. But if not, maybe spend a little time educating yourself on the latest trends, and see for yourself, dude. Smell it out. Does it seem legit? Does it not? And that way you'll keep that trust with your clients.
Yeah, very true. And I think too, as we said before, listen to your client, listen to what they're telling you. They're not going to say necessarily, I need a cold plunge. They may say, I have knee problems. I have trouble after I go out and play soccer, as you do, right? Listen to your clients, listen to their needs. And then you, as the designer, are the one who make those recommendations. What is key is what you said, is that we have to be educated on what the product will solve, what problem that product will solve for the client. We have to be educated on that, and we have to know a lot about it. And I think part of the problem sometimes I see with myself, if I have an idea or if I hear a client say something, is I don't always know the solution that they need until later. And I want to know right off the top of my head, but we always don't know the answer to that. And I think your product could be the life-saving product of the world, but if we don't know what benefits that brings to our clients, it does us no good to sell it. It does you no good as well. So do you have any ways that you can educate designers, or are there things that you have internally? What kind of things do you have in your arsenal, collateral, that you provide to everyone, and especially designers who can sell your product, to help us sell it better?
And by the way, the first time a designer reached out to me to specify Home Plunge on their plans for a house, it was the most exciting thing, because it's supposed to be a D2C brand, right? Initially, the designer started reaching out for that. As someone who's worked in the specification industry, it was just such a big day. So I'll touch on a few things that really make this product stand out and different from the traditional form factor. But at the end of the day, I think the best thing you could probably do, and this is maybe just a challenge to all your listeners, take your ice out of your freezer, go throw it in your bathtub, and do the most basic type of cold plunge you can do. Because if you haven't experienced it, I think you should. It's a little scary. It gets you out of your comfort zone. No one likes to be cold, but trust me, stay in there. Just last 90 seconds. If you can get to 3 minutes, that's the goal. But at around 90 seconds, that's where the shock factor goes away and everything becomes calm. Honestly, if you're having a stressful day, it melts stress away. It's cold, but it just melts your stress away. There's no better solution for it. So that's one great reason to do it too. For designers, to help you specify this, look, if a customer comes to you and says, I want a cold plunge, there are so many products out there now. You're going to just be like, well, I don't even know why I would pick one over the other. Again, we've talked about how they take up space. They're heavy. They're basically permanent installations that go outside. People don't really have privacy when they want to go do it outside. You might have looky-loos, your neighbors looking over the fence and watching you do it. If you really want to make this daily habit to put that back on and go out there, you get dirt on your feet. The whole experience, the whole user experience is just not optimal versus I wake up in the morning, I get out of bed. What's the first thing everyone does? They go to the bathroom, right? Well, on that journey there to the bathroom, all you have to do is flip the switch on the back of it, which, by the way, that's the other thing. It doesn't run 24/7 like all the other products do. It's your bathtub. So you drain it when the water gets dirty. I turn it on first thing in the morning. I run it for an hour, and then I come back after an hour. It's to the temperature where I want it to be, which for me is around 40 degrees. I cold plunge for 5 minutes, and then I turn it off, and I forget about it until the next day. I just leave it alone. So it's not an intrusion to your routine or your day. And then just the maintenance factor. If you're going to be specifying certain products for your customers, you want to consider the user experience of not just using it, but sort of what happens after the fact. What's the maintenance look like? If you go with a traditional form factor cold plunge, you have to include chlorine in the water. You have to include ozone. You have to filter out the particulate that stays in that same water. It is literally a miniature pool that you are constantly keeping clean and treating. Versus what could be better than just draining the tub, right? And then filling it up. And I don't mean every day. That would be wasteful. Some people, you might want to do that, but I shower before I go in. So I go in clean. And that way I'm allowed to use the same water for up to a week, at which point I'll drain it on Sunday. Sunday's my drain day, refill it, and then start the whole week over again. It's just an amazing experience. And this is kind of silly, but I go in naked, which that might seem like too much information, but it's so nice to not have to put on a wet swimsuit to protect yourself from going outside and your neighbors seeing or whatever it is. So you just do that, and it's just fantastic. I know I'm biased, but it has changed my life, and I love it so much.
No, I think it's great. I think all that is really helpful. And I think, it's the privacy of your own home. And the other cool part of it is that it is portable, right? It's something that you can put into a home. Let's say you're listening and you just renovated a bathroom and you're like, oh my God, this client now wants a cold plunge. I have no way to do that. And we just spent $150,000 on their bathroom. Now you can, because it's easily, I wouldn't even call it retrofitting. It's just bringing it into the bathroom and actually using it. So it's a really cool product in that way, that it's actually usable for all kinds of spaces. And again, as the price point, as you said, is great. Speaking of price point, you're going to give an offer, I understand, for anyone who wants to purchase it. You have a code and then a discount that you're going to give them if they're listening and want to try the Home Plunge product, right?
Absolutely. For the thrill of being here, and to all your listeners, we have a discount code McClain. So just put that in at checkout and you'll get a nice $200 off discount.
Great. And that's what's your website they can go to for that?
The website is thehomeplunge.com. And if you want to follow on socials, I'm always trying to put out new, exciting content. We were just on CBS LA. We did a Spartan race event this last weekend before that. Every basically social media you can think of is just at Home Plunge.
Okay, before we close out, I just want to throw some questions at you and just get your immediate top of mind answer to these. I always like this because it's helpful for people. It kind of maybe catches you off guard, but it really pulls out what you're actually thinking. So was there one mindset shift in your business that changed your business?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a point I made earlier, which was it relies a lot on the authenticity of the message. And initially, I tried to follow the same path of a lot of the other brands that were laying out, here's the benefits of cold plunging, which, don't get me wrong, you need to lay those out. But when you try to be a scientist when you're not, you get caught red-handed about talking about the norepinephrine or whatever happens in your brain when you're reacting to cold water. I can't speak to that. So my shift was, I'm not going to try to be that person anymore. I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to speak to what this does for me. And I know it makes me feel better because it reduces my inflammation, along with a couple other things like stress. I've been directly impacted by the reduction of stress. If I'm having a rough day, I'll go hop in the afternoon. So, I don't get caught off guard that way. I'm not being inauthentic, being true to myself, true to my experience. And when I need to, I will pull up a scientific journal that shows the studies of the other benefits. But yeah, I'll just stay to what I know.
I like that. And two, I'll just piggyback off of that. If you don't know the answer to a question and you need to wait to get that question answered the next day, tell the client that. Be honest with them. Don't make up something that you know is may or may not be true. Wait until the next day. Tell them you'll get an answer from the expert and come back to them with that answer. It's as simple as that. It goes back to what you were saying before about being transparent and clear and honest about everything. I love all of that. And the last question, is there one word that you would use to describe the future of luxury wellness? Because your product is in that category of luxury wellness. A lot of people may have dreamt of having a cold plunge and never thought that they could. But is there a word that maybe you would use to describe the future of luxury wellness? And it can be 2 words or 3 if you want, but just anything that comes to mind as the future of wellness in the luxury market.
Beautiful is the word that comes to me. And I think that this may be controversial, but luxury and branding came up in a way that was geared a certain way. And a lot of it was very based on attraction and beautiful things. And then I think we're coming out of the tail end of this period where that got sort of put to the side and everything was inclusive, no matter what it is. And I think that beauty is something that's timeless when it comes to luxury and wellness. If you can make the product beautiful, if you can make your service, your design beautiful, you really can't go wrong. To me, that's what was classical and is timeless. And so therefore it will be the future as well.
Well, you just hit the mother lode when you said beautiful to a bunch of interior designers listening. So good job there. We all perked our ears up when you said the word beautiful. I agree with that. I do think that aesthetically, that is where clients go to. You can give them all the benefits of anything, but if that comes into their house and it doesn't fit aesthetically and it's not, to your point, beautiful, no one's going to buy into that. They're just not. So I think that's great. Christopher, thank you so much for being on today and for sharing the insights of your product, the insights of how you started and founded and run your company, and really just reminding us that the business side of design isn't just strategy, but as you said, it's also service and understanding that client. I really appreciate you being on today.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the McClain Method Podcast. I'm so grateful you made it all the way to the end, because that tells me that you're ready to do the work that truly transforms your brand, your business, and your life. If you want more tools, trainings, and behind-the-scenes looks at what I'm building next, head over to McClainMethod.com, and don't forget to follow along on Instagram at the McClain Method for even more drops of brilliance. And remember, my friend, your brilliance is your brand. Don't dim it, design it. I'll see you next time.